Of the program I've actually been so excited about because Seattle, a lot of people don't know that Seattle has really deep roots in the blockchain space. And this individual is one of those kind of unknown hidden gems who lives right here in our community. J.R. Willett was the initial person to ever do an ICO. So the very first ICO ever launched was done right here out of this community. He's brilliant. He's got some incredible thoughts on blockchain. I love it because in some ways he's a bit of a contrarian, and he makes you think about what this technology is, what it can do, and how we're going to use it. So with that, I'd like to introduce you guys to J.R. Willett.
Well, hello. It's good to see you all here today. I didn't know we were supposed to dance. Sorry, I didn't come prepared for that. But you guys all had lunch. I assume that more people will trickle in as we start the talk out here. As he said, I did do the first initial coin offering in history. That was 2013. Actually came up with the idea of initial coin offering a year and a half earlier, back in 2012. And I was trying to get someone else to do it. I didn't want to be the guy that took that plunge, but it ended up, nobody else was quite crazy enough to give it a try, so I eventually ended up doing it myself. What we created with that first token sale in history was, initially it was called Mastercoin. We renamed it later to Omni, and you may not have heard of Omni, but it is actually, in terms of assets that are hosted on a platform, it's second only to Ethereum. Ethereum has greater value of assets, and mainly that's because of one coin. Raise your hand if you've heard of Tether. If you follow cryptocurrencies, you probably have heard of Tether at one time or another. Tether was built on top of the Omni platform, and so because of Tether and MadeSafe and a few other projects, Omni is the #2 platform in terms of market cap of coins that have been released on it. So the first initial coin offering built a real project that exists to this day, and people use $3 billion worth of tokens, mainly Tether, but $3 billion, it's much bigger than I had imagined a long time ago when I was first thinking about the first token sale. So Chris came on and said I'm a bit of a contrarian. That's the polite way to say it, I think. I need to give you guys a trigger warning before I start this. I think this is safe to say this is going to be the most controversial presentation that you'll see here. You will probably hear something you will disagree with, and that is okay. We can talk about it later, and I love talking about this stuff. So just take that into, just be ready. It's good you just had lunch. Your blood sugar should be up. Be ready to hear some things that might be disturbing to you, but might eventually help you think about blockchain in a better way. So when Chris asked me what I wanted to talk about, this is what I wanted to talk about: blockchain and its use cases. And the title is "Blockchain Has Only One Use." And that's a simplification. Obviously, we use blockchain for many, many, many different things. But I also see, because of my history in this space, I get pitched a lot of ideas. People are always trying to tell me about what they're working on. And a lot of them, I'm skeptical that they're using blockchain in the right way. And so I tried to come up with, if we could condense it down to the most essential essence of what blockchain is for and what it gives us, it comes down to one thing, and the subtitle there, circumventing barriers. Getting around something that's in your way. And in fact, this extends not just to blockchain, but to anything decentralized. The point of decentralization is getting around barriers. So with that set up, let's just dive in here. Let's see, this is supposed to advance the slide. There, it did. Centralized versus decentralized. The most important thing to understand about decentralization as far as weaknesses go is it adds complexity. So I want to talk about some different things that have been decentralized, and what we're going to try to show here is that any decentralized technology could be centralized if we wanted to. And we would lose some things and we would gain some things. The main thing that you gain by going from decentralized to centralized is simplicity. Things become easier to implement. So I gave a couple examples here. BitTorrent is a decentralized file sharing platform. If you were to centralize BitTorrent, what you end up with is essentially an FTP server. FTPs have been around almost as long as the internet. Very simple, BitTorrent very complicated. And BitTorrent, obviously, the point is to get around things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Bitcoin is another thing that is decentralized. Decentralized money, essentially. There has been a magic internet money that was centralized. Years ago, some of you may have heard of eGold. It's not around today because all those people went to jail. But they basically, you can take you could take Ethereum and you could put it on one computer, get rid of the blockchain and have it do the smart contracts and everything on one computer. It would all work. The point of decentralization is that, not that those things aren't simpler and faster, but that the decentralization helps you get around some sort of obstacle or roadblock. So let's go on here. Decentralization is for going around things. So again, the whole internet is decentralized, right? Like a bunch of computers talking to each other. If you wanted to, you could centralize the whole internet. It wouldn't work very well. But you could have one computer that has all the websites in the world, and everyone goes to that one computer and does everything they're going to do on the internet. Technically feasible. Obviously, what you would run into there is a bottleneck, right? A bandwidth bottleneck, storage, processing power, all those things. It doesn't work to do that much traffic on one computer. So again, decentralization, it lets you get around the bottleneck in traffic. BitTorrent, similarly, in addition to the various regulations and things that it gets around, it also gets around bottlenecks in speed as well. And basically, when you're downloading from 10 different people, you can do it faster than from one source. So a lot of times with decentralization, you're circumventing some sort of regulatory roadblock. I like to use the example of transferring money to Venezuela. It is perfectly legal for me as a US citizen to transfer money to Venezuela. The government of Venezuela might not want me to. And so we have here a hostile authority or a bureaucracy that would like to stop me from sending money there, and it's a roadblock, right? And decentralization, cryptocurrency, allows me to go around. So let's talk then about some myths, and this is the part where we're going to get really controversial, because these are some sacred cows here. Things that people, the reasons people say, I'm going to use blockchain in my project for this reason or that. And in fact, I'm going to argue here that many of those reasons are just as good in the centralized way, and they're not good reasons to use blockchain, although blockchain is good at these things. It is not inherently superior to a centralized solution. So the first thing on there is security. Blockchain is secure, right? Bitcoin has never been hacked from a cryptographic perspective. No one's ever broken the fundamental protocol. So yeah, it's secure. We've got lots of blockchains out there, though. And the main point about security that I'd like to make is that complexity is the enemy of security. The more complicated something is, basically it's like you have a vault with doors and you want one door. That's a simple vault. If you've got 100 doors, each one could be a vulnerability, right? So the more complexity you have in a system, the less secure it is. And blockchain, decentralized technologies, is inherently more complicated. So you've got a trade-off to make there. Yes, you can make it secure, but it is not inherently more secure. You can use the same cryptography to secure a centralized system, and it would be simpler and have less doors that people could break into. Faster. I hear this all the time. Well, look at how slow SWIFT is. Look at how long it takes for banks to settle trades with each other. Couldn't we just make that faster with blockchain? The answer is yes. Yes, blockchain can be faster than these slow legacy systems, but the reason that those legacy systems are slow isn't because they're centralized. It's because they've got legacy software, they've got rules, they've got bureaucracy, they've got all sorts of government oversight. It's really hard to change anything in those worlds. So yeah, SWIFT is slow, settling trades between banks is slow, but that doesn't mean that you need blockchain to make it faster. You could take whatever you're going to do with blockchain, and put it on one computer, and it would be faster and handle the transactions per second much better than a decentralized solution could. Another one that people say is, I need blockchain for transparency. And that's not really what they mean. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you can make anything transparent, right? Like I have whatever web service I'm running, I could just make my database public and everyone can see it, that's transparent. What people mean when they say I want blockchain for transparency is they mean I want it to be transparent and I want people to know that it hasn't changed. Right? The idea of immutability, these hashes, you can look and see that it was a certain way at a certain time and it would take an immense amount of computing power to fake that. So immutability, this is probably the most sacred cow that I'm here to slaughter here. The idea that you need blockchain to prove that a certain thing happened at a certain time, specifically a decentralized blockchain. So I want to go to, there was a guy I met recently, his name was Scott Stornetta, actually came up with the idea of blockchain. Him and his partner came up with it. Before Satoshi Nakamoto, before Bitcoin, if you look at Satoshi's white paper, you'll actually see something like 8 citations and something like 3 of them are referencing Scott Stornetta and his partner's work on the idea of a blockchain. He used blockchain in a centralized way. It wasn't a distributed network of computers. It was just taking hashes of documents. He wanted to be able to prove that a certain document was written at a certain time, and that basically like a notary, but without the notary system, and just for things like patents. And so what he did is he would take the hash of the blockchain and he would actually take out a classified ad in the New York Times and put the hash in there. So he didn't need proof of work. He didn't need the network of computers all mining away. He just needed the New York Times and a classified ad, and he got the same immutability without the decentralization. Much, much simpler. So, and I'm not saying that if you want all these things, security and speed and transparency and immutability, that you should take out an ad in the New York Times. What I'm saying is that the idea that I need blockchain for these things isn't really true, and it isn't the fundamental use for blockchain. So let's talk about. Now I'm a huge fan of blockchain. So I get I'm talking about some sacred cows and trying to kill them a little bit, but I love the potential of blockchain, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So again, we started this off with I did the first initial coin offering. That was really about circumventing a barrier. I wasn't thinking about the SEC actually. I was thinking about a venture capitalist system. I thought, if I go to all these venture capitalists, and this was very early in the Bitcoin days, if I go to all these venture capitalists, they're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. I wanted to build a protocol layer on top of Bitcoin. The venture capitalists really hadn't even embraced Bitcoin yet, and much less building something on top of it. And I said, that would be wasting my time. They wouldn't understand what I was trying to do. What I really want to do is raise money from my friends on the Bitcoin forum. That was what drove the whole thing. I wanted, the venture capital world was sort of a barrier to the way I wanted to raise money. And so I thought, I'll go onto the Bitcoin forum, I'll put my address up, my white paper up, and anybody that sends funds to me owns the new coin, and that was just trying to get around a roadblock. And that is what I'm so excited about cryptocurrency. I have been since 2010. Just this potential of all these barriers that are in our way, different things you want to do with money or data. Decentralization, the distributed ledger gets around those things. And if you're using cryptocurrency or a blockchain or a token sale, really you ought to have in the back of your mind, how am I getting around a barrier? Cryptocurrency gets around barriers of money transfer. I gave the example of Venezuela. Smart contracts, it's interesting. You think, what is the barrier there? Well, we have some lawyers in this room. Very few of them would work at the rate that you pay to use a smart contract. They're usually very, very, very expensive. And so that's a barrier, right? Like if you're wanting to do something with contracts and money and things, it's not that there's no way to do that, right? Like you can get a lawyer, you can make a paper contract, it'll be enforced by the courts. The point is not that there's no way to do it. The point is that it is the barrier. It's expensive and it's much easier from a financial standpoint to use a smart contract. Now, what you're doing there, though, is you're adding complexity, right? Like these smart contracts get hacked all the time. A lot of them, there's a bug in it somewhere, and millions of dollars get sucked out of it. And so there's definitely weaknesses to using smart contracts as well. But if you're trying to get around a barrier, it is perfect. I love smart contracts for that reason. All right. I know that some of you are probably involved in a group this large. There's going to be somebody who's working on a private blockchain. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have to say this, but this picture, in my mind, of the horse pulling the automobile, that is what you are doing. Like this guy, he thinks the point of an automobile is to hook it up to a horse and drive around town. He's completely missing the point of the automobile. Private blockchains, it's a pet peeve of mine. They completely miss the point. So let's talk about that for just a minute. With a private blockchain, you have all the problems of a blockchain, all the complexity, all of the potential security holes of poorly written code, or the first bullet point there is, well, what if a hacker gets access to your system? If he has access to even a small mining network, he can blow away your blockchain with a 51% attack in one way or another, depending on what type of blockchain you choose. So you've got all the problems of blockchain. You have none of the advantages of a blockchain. There's nothing in a private blockchain that gets around anything. It might as well just be on one computer. So whenever someone says, yeah, we didn't like, we wanted to do a blockchain, but there was all these problems with regulations, so we're going to do a private blockchain. I've often shot down those ideas, and so if you're here, feel free to talk to me afterward and tell me why your private blockchain is a good idea, and I'll disagree with you. So I'm a pragmatist. So I've kind of poo-pooed some ideas about how to use blockchain here. However, if that's what your investors want, do it anyway. I've seen so many people take, here's my idea of what I want to do with my business, and it doesn't really fit in the blockchain world. I'm just going to bolt blockchain onto that thing, and I'll use it to raise some money. Well, maybe that's what you should do. If the venture capitalists aren't giving you the time of day, and you have a passionate network of people that are interested in what you're doing, maybe you should bolt blockchain onto it in kind of this crazy Frankenstein monster of an economic thing. It might be the right choice. Definitely use blockchain if there's something in your way. If there's some foreign government, some hostile regulatory body, any number of different things could be in your way. Expensive things that could be circumvented. Yeah, definitely use blockchain in that case. It's a wonderful technology for that. What you need to ask yourself, though, is when you're adding blockchain to anything, or decentralization to anything, you are adding complexity. And is that complexity worth it? Is that potential security problems, is that worth it for your project? So I've been involved in the space for an awfully long time. I'm really excited about a lot of the decentralized things that people are doing. I just wish that in all these pitches that I get, that people would think a little bit before they say, I need blockchain, and then they give me this reason that has nothing to do with decentralization. If it doesn't fundamentally benefit from decentralization, then you ought to maybe think about it a little differently. So I'm just going to wrap it up with that. I put my LinkedIn profile up here. I need to warn you in advance, you can follow me on LinkedIn. However, I found out that there's a maximum number of connections. So I connect with everybody in the cryptocurrency space, and when I hit 30,000, they said, no, you can't have any more connections. So I apologize if you in the long queue of people trying to connect to me on LinkedIn, but you can certainly read the things I've written there. I've written about the invention of the ICO. You can see other presentations I've done, and other wildly speculative things that I've written, and very controversial things that I've written and talked about. There's plenty more that you can find on my LinkedIn profile. I thank you for your time today. I hope you're having a good time, and I hope if I stepped on your toes, I hope you can forgive me, but I hope it also makes you think about blockchain in a better way in the future. Thank you.